Well, here we are, 12:05 Sunday morning. Hope you guys are doing okay, and hope you're going to have a good week. I'll be jumping into this A1 practice test here. The people that the select group of people that like to watch my videos should maybe enjoy this one a little bit. Question 1 would be: a no start spins normally but has no compression on number 4 cylinder. A cylinder leakage test performed on cylinder number 4 shows no leakage. What does this mean? Now, to do a cylinder leakage test, you get one of these little testers. You can get one for $30 or $40 from Harbor Freight or somewhere like that. The cylinder leakage side on a good one will be marked like this. If it's just got 2 pressure gauges, it's annoying because. But anyway, you don't pay a lot of attention to this gauge. What you're going to do is, before you connect it to the cylinder, you have to get the cylinder at top dead center compression, both valves closed, right? So that you got a chamber that's supposed to hold pressure. Next, you're going to, before you connect the hose to this that goes down to the cylinder, and it'll be blocked because it's got a little Schrader valve in there. You're going to have your air hose connected. And with your air hose connected, before you connect the hose to the cylinder, you're going to dial this regulator in until this needle shows no leakage at all. You're calibrating it that way. You got to do that every time you do the test. And then with the engine sitting there static, top dead center compression, both valves closed, you're going to be putting pressure in there, and it's going to tell you how much leakage it's got. Then you listen to the intake, and you listen to the crankcase, and you listen to the exhaust. You want to see where that air is going. It's really a good test and all. And used to do it all the time and taught students to do it at the school. But we had one, and I had mentioned it a time or two before, that had no compression on cylinder number 4 at all. None. Zero. Zip. When we did a cylinder leakage test, there was no cylinder leakage. And boy, that just boggled my mind until I found out what had happened. Somebody had tacked that thing out to the point to where it busted a rod and threw it out the side of the block. The engine would spin normally and sounded normal spinning, but this piston wasn't moving. It was at the bottom of its bore. The rod was broke off so that it wasn't interfering with the crankshaft. You didn't hear any noise down there. It was going rrr. Now, if you'll ever see this again, I don't know, but that was the first time I'd ever seen it, and I was blindsided by that one. Alright, question 2. You're test driving to troubleshoot an intermittent misfire that isn't regular enough to set a DTC. Isn't that annoying? The only speed you feel the misfire is 45 to 50 miles an hour, and you feel an intermittent bite. And it doesn't happen enough to where you're going to, be able to set a code. The most likely cause of a misfire like this is what? Sticking valve, clogged injector, spark leakage, or EGR ratcheting. Well, EGR ratcheting is silly because there is no such thing. But what you got here is you got spark leakage. Typically, if you're feeling a bite, that's going to be a spark leaking out and going somewhere else instead of the spark plug. Well, I worked on a Crown Victoria one time that was a 95 model. And that was one of them, a screwball year model, because it had that EDIS ignition system on it. And it was on several other ones. They had it on other vehicles besides the Crown Victoria. But that Crown Victoria, driving on an upgrade about 45 miles an hour, it would bite like that. And I got to looking at that into that thing, and I checked everything twice, and I even recorded the misfire, but it was not anything. I could tell that the thing was nearly new. It was still under basic warranty, and I called the hotline about it. The guy wasn't talking straight with me. He was him-hawing around and tap dancing, and you could tell when somebody's hiding something from you. And so I did a couple of things he told me to do. Then I went back and I said, "Look, this is silly. You need to tell me the truth on this." He almost cried. He goes, okay, we've never been able to fix any of those. Well, that particular year model was all by itself, the way it was structured. And he says, unless enough people started complaining about that he said they didn't know what to do to fix it. he said if somebody, another dealership that worked on a Lincoln and spent lots and lots of warranty money trying to fix it, never could get it to quit doing it. Every now and then you'll see something that's designed in. I said, well, if you'll let me upgrade it to a 96 where the engine controller is firing the coils instead of the DDIS module, you know, well, I bet that would fix it. He goes, no, I can't authorize that, you know. So anyway, the customer wasn't happy, but what else could I do, you know? All right, you got one that comes in like this. Anybody that watches that thing spin over and sees all that puffing out the radiator knows you got a head gasket that's blown on this one here. Okay, so you basically go in here and you're gonna put a head gasket on it, you know, do whatever, fix whatever else is wrong. So let's see, what's the first thing you need to do? You need to find out why it overheated to begin with. I have seen shops do this. They will basically fix the overheating without fixing the reason it overheated, and then it overheats again. You know, of course, anybody that's got any sense is going to do that anyway. But one time it was a real disaster. I knew this guy that took his little Cavalier to a dealership for overheating, and he was real careful not to get it too hot so he wouldn't burn it up. But he took it over there, and whoever the mechanic was noticed some kind of a misfire, or it wasn't quite running right, and that guy got so caught up in working on the misfire that he ran the bill up to like $400 or $500 fixing the misfire and never even touched the overheating problem. So the guy paid the bill and he drove away, and because the overheating problem was never dealt with, and this was at a dealership, at a Chevy dealership, I remember, in another town. It wasn't here where I live, but I knew firsthand about this situation, and he burned the engine up, thought the overheating problem was fixed. He was just driving along, car's running great, burned it up because they didn't fix the overheating problem. You know, of course, they were like, hey, it's not on us, you know, but you know how some of these people are, you know. You can have a really good dealership with a lousy service manager, and it's a recipe for disaster. So that's just whatever. Anyway, find out when that overheated. Also, check the fan. Look at this little video here.
We suspected it might have a bad radiator coolant fan because she said it was running a little warm when she stopped. And so what we did is we found the radiator coolant fan relay, which is going to be that one right there that's got a picture of the radiator. Don't get confused by these two. Alright, and then two copper terminals right here are the load carrying terminals. And so what we did first was we found the hot one right here, and then we went to the other copper terminal, and then we found out that one there was showing no ground at all. See, we notice hook this to hot. Alright, now we're going to spin that fan, and every now and then, see, that light will come on when we're turning the fan through.
Every part of that
commutator is burned
out except one.
See, we're turning the fan. Sometimes we have a light, and sometimes we don't. What that means is she's got a bad condenser. Not a condenser fan, it's working. A radiator coolant fan. And so we determined with minimal effort that this has a bad radiator coolant fan. So we're going to see if I can get her cooling fan to put on here.
I had seen first time I ever noticed that was I was working on a Tempo at the Ford place, and they said that it would make a big noise and a bunch of steam would come out from under the hood. Well, what that was the pop-off valve on the air conditioner compressor because the condenser fan wasn't coming on. Well, they bring it over there, and this thing would run in my service bay, and the fan kicking off and on, off and on, off and on, off and on for 4 hours. And then I would say, well, I'm really not sure what to do about this, you know. Why the thing, though, because I didn't know that it was a fan problem at the time. And as soon as they'd get down there to the red light, it would do it again. And so I got to thinking, and I came up with this way of checking these fans myself. I never saw anybody else do this unless I mentioned it or taught them to do it. Now, somebody may have been doing it, but if you hook a test light in series with that fan, between ground, test light goes to the fan, that light should burn steady. If you're turning that fan through and that light ever goes off, you need to replace that fan. End of story. That's a go, no-go test. This one here was only lighting it on one band of the commutator. I'd seen that on a PT Cruiser too. But a lot of the times what's really insidious is you'll have one that you'll turn through and a couple of the commutators will be dark, but all the rest of them will be okay. It's like playing roulette. If it stops on that dark one, that fan will not come on, and that will cause one to intermittently overheat, and it can overheat bad enough to where it causes some serious engine problems. So keep that in mind too. This is a short lesson on cylinder pressure waveforms. Watch this careful. Engine running, not spinning, running. Transducer connected into the spark plug port, and you're reading the pressure waves. What you're doing. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about that. What's happening at each letter? That's the question. Question 4, what's happening at each letter of that waveform? Now if you back up and look at the previous slide, you'll know the answer to these. It's kind of like an open book test. All right, let's let that run long enough. Watch this. Here's your answers. Now this bottom line down here is atmosphere. Always remember that. This bottom line is atmosphere. You're going to have a slight increase in pressure during the exhaust stroke, but it's not going to be near as much of a bounce as you're going to get during the compression stroke. So I got some more questions about these waveforms, so I'm not going to go into too much more about this, but you can see that your compression stroke is here, top dead center. Power stroke is here as it's going back down. This is where it basically the spark happens right about here. So because the faster the engine runs when it's not loaded, the sooner the spark needs to happen, because you need to take advantage of that pressure wave. So that's why ignition time is so important. And so bottom dead center is here. Exhaust valve opens as the piston's coming back up. It's pushing exhaust out, so on and so forth. And then let's move to the next one here. How many degrees of crankshaft rotation between A and A? In other words, between here and here, how many degrees of crankshaft rotation do you have? All right. 720 degrees. There's actually, on the picoscope, it actually has a little set of, it's got an overlay that you can dial that in whenever you're looking at one of these pressure waves. Question 6, identify the part of the waveform corresponding with valve overlap. Valve overlap, that's the one you're at top dead center on the exhaust stroke, and the intake and the exhaust valves are open at the same time for that final little bit of purging of the exhaust gas, so you'll have a nice clean mix. If you don't have overlap, you're going to have rough idle and all kinds of stuff. The D area, right here, in this area right here is where your overlap is, because the exhaust valve's closed, the intake valve is opening, getting ready to, it's actually, intake valve is opening right here, and this is when it's drawing the air in that it's going to compress during the compression stroke. And so, which valve is open at position C? That's not too hard. That's going to be the exhaust valve is going to be open at position C, because the piston's going up here. You can study these, and get a good understanding on this. You should have tried to make that video I did with the pistons going up and down, timing it with that was tricky. Identify the part of the waveform where the intake valve is open. That's going to be between D and the beginning of E. So it's going to be open right here. I say that. Actually, my answer indicates that it's over here, but it actually opens right around here, because it's got to pull all that air in that it's going to be squeezing during this compression stroke. That is the end of this. We've only been here about 15 minutes, but I hope you guys got some good out of this. I hope you had time to watch it all. And let me know what you think about this. If it was a nice tidy 10-question test, you'd have 10 points per question. I'll let you do the math on figuring out what your score is. But I'll see you guys next week. Send me a howdy, and I'll talk to y'all next time.